The market was loud, the morning was cold, and nobody wanted her. Mute, useless, a girl who could not even answer a simple question. The man selling her was about to strike her for not responding. That was when he appeared, the Marquess of Ashford, the coldest man in 3 counties, a man nobody crossed, nobody argued with, nobody questioned. He looked at the man with his hand raised. He said, "Put it down." 2 words, no heat, no threat. The hand came down. He paid 10 coins. He took her. He asked nothing. What he did not know, what nobody at that market knew, was that the broken mute girl he'd just paid 10 coins for was the only person alive who could destroy everything Chancellor Voss had spent 6 years building. And somewhere in London, Voss had just been told exactly where she was. Welcome to Duke and Duchess, the home of stories that will reach inside your chest and stay there. Hit subscribe right now. Drop a comment and tell us where you were watching from and what time it is. London? New York? Toronto? Sydney? We want to know how far this story has traveled. Now, let us go back to the beginning and show you everything. The market at Ashford Cross was not the kind of place people went by choice. It sat at the junction of 2 county roads in the gray November morning, like something the county was embarrassed about but had not yet found a way to remove. Livestock pens on the eastern side, grain trading is in the middle, and at the far end, against the stone wall where the light was worst and the smell was worst, and the people passing moved fastest, the human trade. It was not called that. It was called domestic placement, labor acquisition, the arrangement of service contracts for individuals of limited circumstance. It was called many things. It was what it was. Lyra had been standing at that wall since before dawn. Her wrists were bound with rope, not tightly enough to cut, but tightly enough to be visible, which was the point. Her dress was gray and worn at the elbows, and had been worn by at least 2 women before her, judging by the places where the fabric had been let out and taken in again. Her feet were bare on the November ground. Master Gred had been trying to sell her for 3 hours. He was not having success. She was mute, he explained to each person who stopped, could not speak, had not spoken in 6 years, could not tell you why. But she was strong and clean and capable of following instruction and willing to work. The potential buyers looked at her with the assessing eyes of people calculating usefulness versus inconvenience. The inconvenience won every time. One man offered 2 coins. Gred said 3. The man walked away. Another stopped and asked her a question directly, watching her face when she did not answer with the focused, unpleasant attention of someone testing a claim. Then he said something about her eyes, that she looked at him like she thought she was better than him. He said this with the particular offense of a man who feels seen by someone he considers beneath him. He walked away too. Gred turned to her. He was not a large man, but he was a mean one in the specific way of small men given small authority who have decided to exercise it completely. He told her she was making this difficult, that her face was the problem, that she needed to look less like she was thinking and more like she was willing. He raised his hand. He did not get to finish the motion. "Put your hand down." The voice came from behind him, quiet, completely without heat. The tone of a man who does not raise his voice because he has never needed to. Gred turned. Lord Sebastian Calloway, the Marquess of Ashford, was standing 3 feet away. He was 34 years old, tall and dark-coated against the November morning, the kind of face that had been described at various points as severe and cold, and in certain county circles as frightening, though nobody who said this said it to him directly. Gray eyes that were currently looking at Gred with the particular expression of a man who has assessed a situation completely and found it wanting. He was not supposed to be at Ashford Cross Market. He had been passing through on county business and had seen what was happening from the road and had stopped his horse and come through the gate with the purposeful stride of a man acting on instinct before his judgment had finished forming an opinion. "What are you asking for her?"
Sebastian said. Gred blinked. 3 coins, my lord. Sebastian looked at Lyra. She looked back at him, not with the downcast eyes of a woman in her position performing the expected submission, directly, with the dark, steady gaze of someone who has been looked at as an object for 6 years and is looking back at this particular man as a person looks at another person. Sebastian held the look for a moment. Then he reached into his coat. 10, he said. He put the coins in Gred's hand without waiting for a response. He looked at Lyra. Can you ride? She shook her head. Then you will sit in front. He walked back to his horse. She stood for a moment in the mud at Ashford Cross Market with the rope still on her wrists and the November cold on her bare feet. Then she followed him. He did not ask her name. He did not explain where he was taking her. He untied her wrists when they reached his horse without commenting on the marks the rope had left, and helped her up, and rode north toward Ashford Manor in complete silence. Lyra sat in front of him and felt the particular disorientation of someone who has been surviving for so long that an unexpected kindness does not feel like kindness yet. It feels like something she does not have a name for. It would take her a long time to remember the name. It was safety.
Ashford Manor was everything Lyra had not had in 6 years. Warm, lit, the smell of real food from the kitchen reaching the entrance hall before they were through the door. A housekeeper who appeared immediately, Mrs. Aldwin, 58 years old, with the rounded authority of a woman who has run a great house for 3 decades and considers the efficient management of unexpected arrivals simply part of the position. Sebastian said 4 words, "Find her something warm." Then he went to his study. Mrs. Aldwin looked at Lyra, at the worn dress, the bare feet red from the cold, the rope marks on both wrists, the dark eyes that looked back at her with the careful assessment of someone deciding whether this new situation was safe or simply a different kind of unsafe. "Come with me," Mrs. Aldwin said. She said it gently, the specific gentleness of a woman who has identified that gentleness is what is needed and has no agenda in providing it. Lyra followed her. She was given a room, small but warm, with a fire already burning and a bed with actual blankets. She was given food, real food, not the gray, unidentifiable thing that had been her meals for the past several years. She was given a dress that fit her and shoes that were not too large and a basin of warm water to wash in, and was left alone to do it with the door closed. She sat on the edge of the bed after Mrs. Aldwin left. She looked at the fire. She had not had a room with a fire in 4 years. She had slept in a kitchen in her last placement, before that a cellar, before that a corner of a stable loft that she had shared with 2 other girls who had both disappeared one morning without explanation, and whose absence nobody in the household had commented on. She had learned not to ask questions. She had learned not to trust warmth. She looked at the fire for a long time. Then she ate everything on the plate. She worked. Mrs. Aldwin gave her light duties initially, observing, quietly, what she was capable of. Lyra cleaned, she organized, she moved through the rooms of Ashford Manor with the focused efficiency of someone who has been doing household work for years and has developed a particular thoroughness about it. She was good at it. She was good at everything they gave her, but she was better at things they had not given her. On the 3rd morning, she was dusting the shelves in Sebastian's study. He was out on estate business, the room empty, when she noticed a letter open on his desk, a correspondence with a county solicitor about a land dispute. She read it in passing as she moved the dustcloth across the surface. She stopped, read it again. The solicitor's argument was wrong. The land boundary reference cited in the 3rd paragraph referred to the wrong survey map. She could see this clearly from the document numbers referenced. The entire legal position Sebastian was planning to take was built on an incorrect foundation. She should not have done what she did next. She knew she should not. She picked up his pen. She wrote a single line in the margin of the letter in small, precise handwriting, indicating the correct survey reference and the document number that would support it. Then she put the pen down and went back to dusting. Sebastian found the note that evening. He stared at it for a long time. Then he came to find Mrs. Aldwin.
"The correction in the margin of the solicitor's letter," he said. "Who wrote it?" Mrs. Aldwyn looked at him. "I believe it was Lyra, my lord." Sebastian looked at his housekeeper. "She can read," he said. "Apparently," Mrs. Aldwyn said. "And write." "Also, apparently." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "Where did she come from?" he said. "That," Mrs. Aldwyn said, "is a question I have been asking since she arrived." What Mrs. Aldwyn had been doing since Lyra arrived was watching. She had been watching with the focused attention of a woman who has managed a great house for 3 decades and has learned that the most important information about a person is usually found not in what they say, but in what they cannot help doing naturally. Lyra read everything she could access, not hungrily, not the way of someone starved of reading, with the ease of someone for whom reading is simply what you do when text is in front of you. She read in 3 languages. Mrs. Aldwyn confirmed this on the 5th day, when she left a French household inventory on the kitchen table and watched Lyra correct a calculation error in it without pausing. She responded to music. On the evening when Sebastian played the piano in the drawing room, a habit he carried since boyhood and pursued alone because nobody at Ashford Manor was invited to his private hours, Lyra stopped outside the drawing room door and stood completely still and listened. Not with the casual interest of a servant pausing at a sound, with the particular recognition of someone hearing something that belongs to a part of their life they had thought was gone. Mrs. Aldwyn saw this from the corridor. And then there was the wrist. On the 7th morning, when Lyra was rolling up her sleeves to work at the kitchen basin, Mrs. Aldwyn saw it clearly for the first time. Inside the left wrist, a small crescent-shaped mark, not a scar, not an injury, a birthmark in the precise shape of a crescent moon. Mrs. Aldwyn had read the Gazette 6 years ago. She remembered the description exactly. She went to find Dr. Phineas Cole that afternoon. Mrs. Aldwyn was not a dramatic woman. She did not leap to conclusions. She assembled information the way a careful person assembles anything, piece by piece, until the picture was undeniable. The reading, the languages, the music, the birthmark. She laid all of it in front of Dr. Cole on a Tuesday afternoon in the small sitting room off the main corridor. Cole listened to everything. Then he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I need to speak to Lord Calloway." And Mrs. Aldwyn said, "Yes, you do." Sebastian did not believe it. Cole told him everything Mrs. Aldwyn had assembled, the languages, the reading, the music, the birthmark matching the description in the Royal Gazette from 6 years ago, when the Aldenmore Palace was taken and the royal family destroyed, and the youngest princess, 16 years old, dark-haired, a crescent birthmark on the inside of her left wrist, disappeared and was presumed dead. Sebastian listened to all of it. Then he said, "No." "My lord, she is a servant girl," Sebastian said. "She was at a roadside market being sold for 3 coins. The coincidence of a birthmark is not, it is not only the birthmark," Cole said. "It is everything together, the sum of it." "No," Sebastian said again. Cole left. Sebastian sat in his study and did not believe it. He believed it by morning. Not because he had found new evidence, because he had spent the night not sleeping and had instead found himself reviewing every interaction he had observed with Lyra since she arrived at Ashford Manor, and had discovered that every single one of them was inconsistent with a servant girl. The way she held herself at dinner when she thought nobody was watching, the spine completely straight, the hands in her lap with a specific stillness that was not submissive. That was the stillness of someone who had been taught from childhood that composure was not optional. The way she had corrected the solicitor's letter, not tentatively, with the confidence of someone who knew they were right and simply could not help expressing it. The way she had stood at that market in the mud, with bare feet and rope on her wrists, and looked at him, not with fear, not with the grateful relief of someone being rescued, with the direct, steady assessment of an equal. He had noticed that at the time. He had not understood it then. He began to understand it now. He called for Lyra. She came to his study in the morning dress Mrs. Aldwyn had provided. She stood across from his desk with her hands at her sides and waited with the patience of someone who has learned that patience is the only response available. Sebastian looked at her. She looked back at him. "I am going to show you something," he said. "I want you to tell me, in whatever way you can, whether it means anything to you." He opened the drawer of his desk and took out the Gazette, 6 years old. The page folded to the relevant article. He put it on the desk and turned it so she could read it. He watched her face. She looked down at the page. She read. He watched every small movement of her face while she read, the particular stillness that came over it, the way her breathing changed, the way her hands, which had been completely still at her sides, moved slightly, not dramatically, a small movement of the fingers of her left hand as though responding to something involuntary. She finished reading. She looked up at him. Her dark eyes were completely steady. She lifted her left hand. She turned her wrist so the inside faced him, the crescent-shaped birthmark, small, precise, exactly as described in the Gazette on the desk between them. Sebastian looked at it. He looked at her face. "You know who you are," he said. She did not nod. She did not gesture. She simply held his gaze with the particular expression of a woman who has known who she was for 6 years and had no way to say it. "You have always known," he said. The expression did not change, but something in her eyes confirmed it completely. Sebastian sat back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at her. "I need you to trust me," he said. "I understand why that is a significant thing to ask. I understand what trusting people has cost you, but I need you to trust me because what comes next requires it." She looked at him for a long time. Then she sat down in the chair across from his desk, without being invited, with the composure of a woman taking her seat. Sebastian looked at her sitting across from him. He understood what the gesture meant. He opened a fresh sheet of paper and put it on the desk between them with a pen. "Tell me everything," he said. She wrote for 2 hours. Sebastian read every word. He asked questions. She answered them in writing with the precision and detail of someone who has been storing a complete and accurate account for 6 years and is finally giving it to someone who can use it. When she finished, Sebastian sat with the pages for a long time. Then he looked at her, at the woman who had been sold at a roadside market for less than the cost of a meal, at the woman who had spent 6 years in kitchens and cellars and stable lofts, at the woman who had stood in the mud with rope on her wrists and looked at him like an equal because she was one. He said, "I am going to get you back everything they took from you." She looked at him. She picked up the pen. She wrote one word. "Why?" Sebastian looked at the word. Then he looked at her. "Because 10 coins," he said, "was not a transaction. It was a choice, and I intend to honor it." Sebastian moved carefully. He understood the dimensions of what he was dealing with. Chancellor Voss had held power for 6 years on the foundation of a coup that everyone with authority to question had been persuaded, through money or fear or both, to accept as concluded. The Aldenmore royal line was extinct. The throne had been absorbed into the Chancellor's administration. The story was settled. The story was about to be unsettled. Sebastian sent Captain Reed to London with specific instructions: find the documents, the original succession records, the witnesses to the princess's disappearance who had never been formally interviewed, the physical evidence of the coup night that had been suppressed rather than destroyed, because destroying evidence requires being certain nobody will ever look for it. Reed left on a Monday. Sebastian began reviewing the Calloway estate records that Pierce had been managing in his absence. He had not looked at these closely since returning from 3 years on the continent. He had trusted Pierce. They were family. Pierce had been running Ashford's affairs competently and without apparent issue, and Sebastian had not found a reason to examine the details. He found a reason now. It took him 4 days to find the first irregularity, a payment to a London address that appeared in the accounts as estate maintenance but corresponded to no property in the Calloway holdings. He found the second irregularity on the 5th day, a correspondence record, Not the correspondence itself, which had been removed, but the record of its existence between Pierce and a legal firm in the city that Sebastian recognized immediately, Chancellor Voss's legal firm. Sebastian sat with this information for a full evening. Pierce had been reporting to Voss. For how long was not yet clear, about what Sebastian was beginning to understand. Pierce would have known immediately when Sebastian brought a mute, dark-haired servant girl home from Ashford Cross Market. Pierce would have noted the description. Pierce would have been the first person in the county to connect those details to the Gazette report from 6 years ago. Pierce had been Voss's eyes inside Ashford Manor, which meant Voss already knew, which meant the soldiers were coming. Sebastian called Captain Reed back from London. Reed arrived on a Thursday with everything Sebastian had sent him for and more. The succession documents, 3 witnesses who had survived the coup night and had been living quietly under assumed identities for 6 years, waiting for someone with enough authority and enough courage to ask them the right questions. And a sealed letter from a Crown authority in London, a man Reed had served under in the military and who still held a position significant enough to matter, confirming that the Aldenmore succession question had never been formally closed and remained an open constitutional matter. Sebastian read the letter twice. He went to find Lyra. She was in the library. She had discovered the library on her second day at Ashford Manor and had been spending her free hours there with the focused pleasure of someone returned to something they had been denied for a long time. She sat in the chair by the window with a book open and the November light coming in, and she looked for the first time since Sebastian had brought her from the market like someone who was not bracing for the next thing. She looked up when he came in. He sat across from her. He told her what he had found, about Pierce, about Voss knowing, about the soldiers he expected were coming, about what Reed had brought back from London. She listened to everything without expression. He put the succession document on the table between them. "This is yours," he said. "What is in this document is yours. What Reed's witnesses will testify to is yours. The constitutional question is yours, all of it." She looked at the document. Then she looked at him. She picked up the pen from the desk beside her. She wrote, "Are you afraid?" Sebastian looked at the question. "Yes," he said honestly. "Voss has held this for 6 years. He will not release it without a fight." She wrote again, "So will I." Sebastian looked at those 3 words. He looked at this woman who had been sold for 10 coins, who had spent 6 years in situations that should have broken her and had not, who had sat in this library with a book open and looked for one unguarded moment like herself. "I know," he said. That night, Pierce disappeared from Ashford Manor. The soldiers arrived at midnight. Reed had seen them coming from the East Tower. 20 minutes. He used every one. Sebastian stood in the entrance hall with a wound in his side from the skirmish at the gate that he was refusing to acknowledge because acknowledging it would require stopping, and stopping was not available to him. Beside him stood Lyra, servant's dress, dark hair loose, hands at her sides. Chancellor Voss walked through the door and looked at her, and something moved in his face that had not moved in 30 years. Fear. The night Sebastian was wounded, Lyra did not leave his side. It had happened at the gate. One of Voss's soldiers, better positioned than the others, a blade finding the gap between Sebastian's coat and his defense before Reed could close the distance. Not deep enough to be immediately fatal, deep enough to be serious if it was not properly managed. Dr. Cole managed it in the entrance hall with the focused efficiency of a man who has treated battlefield wounds and considers a manor house entrance hall a significant improvement on previous working conditions. Sebastian was moved to his room. Cole told him to stay still and rest, and that he would return in 2 hours to check the dressing. Sebastian told Cole he was fine. Cole told Sebastian that fine was not a medical assessment, and left. Lyra sat in the chair beside Sebastian's bed. The manor was quiet now. Reed had the soldiers secured. Pierce had been found attempting to leave through the east field and was currently explaining himself to 2 of Reed's men in the estate office. The immediate crisis was contained, but Voss was still in the drawing room, with his authority and his confidence, and 30 years of never having been successfully challenged, and the settled certainty of a man who believes that whatever is happening tonight can still be managed. Lyra sat beside Sebastian and listened to him breathe and looked at the bandage Cole had applied and felt something that had been building since the moment she watched Voss's soldiers drag Sebastian away from the gate. She had watched this man pay 10 coins for her at a market where nobody else had stopped. She had watched him read her writing for 2 hours without once looking at her, as though her words were less than anyone else's words. She had watched him say, 10 coins was not a transaction, it was a choice, and I intend to honor it, and mean it in the specific way that words mean things when the person saying them has nothing to gain from saying them. She had not been able to protect him tonight. She had stood in the entrance hall in her servant's dress and watched him get hurt and had not been able to do anything because she had no voice and no authority and nothing except the truth that only she could speak and that she had not been able to speak for 6 years. She looked at Sebastian's face. He was awake, barely, watching her with the gray eyes that had looked at her at that market, not as a thing to be assessed, but as a person to be seen. "You should sleep," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You do not have to stay," he said. She looked at him, at the wound, at the bandage, at the man who had paid 10 coins when everyone else had walked away. Something that had been locked for 6 years, locked on the night soldiers came and fire came, and everything she had ever known disappeared, and the terror of it had closed around her voice like a fist and had not opened since, shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, simply the way things open when the thing holding them closed finally decides the closing is no longer necessary. She leaned forward in the chair. She opened her mouth. Sebastian. One word, his name, barely above a whisper, rough from 6 years of disuse, almost unrecognizable as a voice, but a voice. Sebastian went completely still. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the dark, steady eyes that had looked at him at the first time at a roadside market and had not looked away since. "Sebastian," she said again, slightly stronger, as though the second time confirmed the first. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Hello," he said quietly. Something broke open in her face. Not grief, not relief, something that was both of those things and something else entirely. The particular expression of a person who had been locked outside of themselves for a very long time and has just found the door. She pressed both hands over her mouth. She breathed. He waited. When she lowered her hands, her face was completely composed. "My name," she said, carefully, each word deliberate, each word the act of a person rebuilding something from the foundation, "is Irene. I am the daughter of King Aldrich and Queen Sarah of Aldenmore. I was 16 years old when Chancellor Voss took everything from my family, and I have been waiting 6 years for a room quiet enough to say that out loud." Sebastian looked at her. "You have it," he said. "Say whatever you need to say." She looked at him. Then she began to talk. Voss was still in the drawing room when Lyra walked in. She walked in alone. Sebastian had argued against this. She had told him in the new voice that was rough and quiet and entirely her own that this was hers to do and that she intended to do it. He let her. Reed stood in the corridor outside the drawing-room door with 3 men and the sealed letter from London and the succession documents and the statements from the 3 witnesses who survived the coup night. Voss looked up when she came through the door. He looked at her face, at her wrist, at the woman who had been a mute servant girl for 6 years and was standing in the doorway of the drawing-room of Ashford Manor with the posture of someone who was born to stand in doorways considerably grander than this one. "You cannot," he began. "My name," Lyra said, "is Irene of Aldenmore, and you are going to sit down." Voss stared at her. She looked at him with the dark, steady eyes that had looked at him destroy her family 6 years ago from a corridor in the palace, while soldiers moved through the rooms and fire moved through the east wing, and she had pressed herself against the stone wall and understood that if she made a sound, she would die. She had not made a sound. She was making one now. "Sit down," she said. He sat. Reed came through the door behind her with the documents, and Chancellor Voss, who had held power for 6 years on the foundation of a story he had constructed, looked at the evidence being laid on the table in front of him and understood that the story was over.
Voss was arrested before morning. Pierce cooperated fully. It did not save him.
The Aldenmore throne was restored to its rightful heir, Irene, not Lyra, not the mute servant girl from Ashford Cross Market. Irene, Princess of Aldenmore, the heir they spent 6 years pretending did not exist. She went back. Sebastian let her go. She came back 3 months later, walking through the gates of Ashford Manor as herself. Sebastian was in the entrance hall. She said, "I came back." He said, "I know." She said, "You are not going to ask why." He said, "No." She looked at the man who paid 10 coins when everyone else walked away. She said, "It was a choice for me too." He smiled, the real one. She smiled back. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe now. New stories every week, only on Duke and Duchess. We will see you for the next one. It is already waiting.